Sarah Martinez wiped down another rifle with practiced efficiency, her calloused hands moving across the metal surface with the same rhythm she had maintained for the past 8 years. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the military armory, casting harsh shadows across rows of weapons that most people would never see, let alone touch. At 42, Sarah had grown comfortable in her role as the base's armory cleaner, a position that paid the bills and kept her close to the world she once knew intimately. The morning routine never changed. Arrive at 0500 hours, punch in her security code, methodically clean, and inspect each weapon in her assigned section, log any issues, and repeat. It was honest work, though far removed from her previous life as Staff Sergeant Sarah Martinez, one of the Army's most skilled reconnaissance specialists. Those days felt like they belonged to someone else entirely, buried beneath years of deliberately mundane civilian life. Her phone buzzed against her hip as she reached for the next weapon in line. The caller ID showed her ex-husband's number, which was unusual. Miguel rarely called during work hours, and, when he did, it was typically about their son Danny's school schedule or weekend plans. Sarah glanced around the empty armory before answering. "What's up, Miguel?" "I'm at work." The silence on the other end lasted too long. When Miguel finally spoke, his voice carried a tremor she had never heard before, not even during their worst arguments before the divorce. "Sarah, Danny's missing." The rifle slipped from her hands, clattering against the metal table. "What do you mean missing?" "He didn't come home from school yesterday. I thought maybe he went to a friend's house without telling me. You know how kids are? But I called everyone. His teachers, his friends' parents, everyone. Nobody's seen him since he left school." Sarah's mind immediately shifted into analytical mode, the same mental state that had kept her alive during 3 combat deployments. "Have you called the police?" "They took a report, but they said most missing kids show up within 24 hours. It's been 18 hours, Sarah. Something's wrong. Danny wouldn't just disappear like this." She was already moving toward her locker, grabbing her jacket and keys. "I'm coming over. Don't touch anything in his room until I get there." The drive to Miguel's house took 15 minutes through morning traffic, but it felt like hours. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, cataloging everything she knew about missing children cases. Most were runaways or misunderstandings. Some were custody disputes. But a small percentage involved something far more sinister, and those cases required immediate action. Miguel met her at the front door, his usually neat appearance disheveled. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept. Behind him, Sarah could see their 13-year-old son's backpack sitting on the kitchen counter, exactly where Danny would have left it after school. "Tell me everything," Sarah said, stepping inside. "Every detail from yesterday morning until you realized he was missing." Miguel led her to the kitchen table, where he had laid out Danny's schedule written in the boy's careful handwriting. He had normal classes until 3:15, math tutoring until 4. Usually walks home from there. Takes about 20 minutes. When he wasn't here by 5, I figured he stopped somewhere. By 6, I started calling. Sarah studied the schedule, noting the route Danny would have taken. She knew the neighborhood well. It was safe, middle class, the kind of place where children rode bikes until dark and parents didn't worry about strangers. But safe neighborhoods could become dangerous in an instant. "Who did you call first?" "His math tutor, Mrs. Peterson. She said he left right at 4, seemed normal. Then, I called 3 of his closest friends. None of them had seen him after school. That's when I started driving around, looking. Show me his room." Danny's bedroom reflected a typical 13-year-old's interests: video game posters, scattered homework assignments, a baseball glove on the dresser. But Sarah wasn't looking at the obvious things. She was searching for signs of planning, evidence that Danny might have packed belongings for an extended absence. His clothes appeared untouched. His favorite jacket hung on the back of his desk chair. The small emergency cash she had taught him to keep hidden was still in his desk drawer. Whatever had happened to Danny, he hadn't planned for it. "Miguel, I need you to think carefully. Has Danny mentioned anything unusual lately? New friends, adults who might have approached him, anything different about his routine?" Her ex-husband sat heavily on Danny's bed, running his hands through his hair. There was something about a new guy at the tutoring center. Danny mentioned him a couple times, said he was asking a lot of questions about the kids' families. I didn't think much of it at the time. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. What kind of questions? Where they lived, what their parents did for work, whether they walked home alone. Danny thought it was weird, but he's 13. Everything seems weird to him. This information changed everything. Sarah's military training had included extensive education about human trafficking and child abduction rings. The targeting pattern Miguel described was textbook predator behavior. Identify vulnerable targets, gather intelligence, establish patterns, then strike. We need to talk to Mrs. Peterson immediately, Sarah said. And I want to see this tutoring center. The math tutoring center occupied a strip mall location between a dry cleaner and a sandwich shop. Mrs. Peterson, a retired elementary school teacher, ran the center with 2 part-time assistants. She met Sarah and Miguel in the small waiting area, her expression grave with concern. I've been tutoring children for 15 years, Mrs. Peterson said. Danny's a good boy, always polite, always on time. Yesterday was completely normal until he left. Tell me about the new employee Miguel mentioned, Sarah said. The one asking questions about the children. Mrs. Peterson's face tightened. Robert. He started 3 weeks ago, said he had experience working with children. His references checked out, and we needed the help. But some of the children mentioned he asked personal questions during sessions. What kind of personal questions? Family situations, home addresses, daily schedules. He claimed it helped him understand their academic needs better. I should have paid more attention. Sarah felt the familiar cold focus that had served her during military operations. Is he working today? He called in sick this morning. First time since he started. I need his full name and address. Mrs. Peterson hesitated. I can't just give out employee information. My son is missing, Sarah said quietly. And your employee was asking targeted questions about children's personal lives. You can give me that information now, or you can explain to the police why you delayed a missing child investigation. The address led to an apartment complex on the outskirts of town. Sarah drove while Miguel called the police to report the new information. The detective assigned to Danny's case agreed to meet them at the apartment, but emphasized they couldn't enter without a warrant or probable cause. Sarah parked across the street and studied the building. It was older, with external staircases and minimal security. The kind of place where people could come and go without attracting attention. Robert's apartment was on the 2nd floor, corner unit. The detective said to wait. Miguel reminded her. Sarah was already getting out of the car. The detective doesn't have a missing son. She approached the apartment building with the systematic caution that had kept her alive in hostile territory. The external staircase provided cover while she observed the target apartment. No visible activity, curtains drawn, but she could hear faint sounds from inside. The apartment manager, a heavy-set man in his 60s, emerged from the ground floor office as Sarah reached the 2nd floor landing. You looking for someone? Robert in 2C. Is he home? Haven't seen him since yesterday evening. He was loading stuff into his car. Looked like he was going somewhere. Why? He in some kind of trouble? Sarah's blood ran cold. What time yesterday evening? Around 6, maybe 7. Had a bunch of bags, seemed in a hurry. The timeline matched perfectly. Robert had left shortly after Danny went missing, and he was moving belongings as if planning an extended absence. Every instinct Sarah had developed during years of tracking enemies told her that Danny was with this man, possibly hundreds of miles away by now. Miguel caught up with her on the landing, slightly out of breath. The detective's 5 minutes away. We should wait. Danny doesn't have 5 minutes, Sarah replied. She approached Robert's door and knocked firmly. Robert? It's Mrs. Peterson from the tutoring center. I need to speak with you about yesterday's schedule. No response. Sarah tried the doorknob and found it unlocked. She looked at Miguel, who nodded despite his obvious fear. They entered the apartment together. The scene inside confirmed Sarah's worst suspicions. The apartment was nearly empty, with only basic furniture remaining. But scattered on a table near the window were photographs. Dozens of them. Pictures of children from the tutoring center, including several clear shots of Danny walking home from school. Jesus, Miguel whispered. He was watching our son. Sarah moved through the apartment methodically, searching for any clue about Robert's destination. In the bedroom, she found a road atlas with several routes highlighted in different colors. The markings led to 3 different states, but one route was traced more heavily than the others, ending at a rural area in northern Colorado. Her phone rang. Detective Morrison's number. We're here. Where are you? Inside the apartment. You need to see this. Detective Morrison was a compact woman in her 40s with graying hair and tired eyes that had seen too many cases like this one. She surveyed the photographs and maps with professional detachment, but Sarah could see the anger beneath her calm exterior. This changes things significantly, Morrison said. I'm calling the FBI. This looks like organized trafficking, not an opportunistic abduction. How long will it take them to get involved? Sarah asked. They'll have someone here within hours. But, Sarah, I need you to understand something. If this man has your son, he could be anywhere by now. These guys have networks, safe houses, ways of moving children across state lines quickly. Sarah stared at the map, focusing on the heavily marked route to Colorado. Every minute they spent waiting for federal involvement was another minute Danny moved further from home, another minute closer to disappearing forever. I want copies of everything, she told Morrison. Photos, maps, whatever you can give me. Sarah, you're not thinking of going after him yourself. That's not how this works. I'm not thinking of anything except finding my son. Sarah's voice carried the quiet authority she had once used to command soldiers in combat. But I need information to help the investigation. Morrison studied her for a long moment. I know about your military service. Your record says you were reconnaissance, special operations. But this is in Afghanistan, and you're not a soldier anymore. Today I am. The detective's radio crackled with dispatch traffic. A bolo alert for Robert's vehicle had already been issued across 3 states. Highway patrol units were searching, but Sarah knew how easy it was to avoid detection on rural routes if you knew what you were doing. Miguel approached her as Morrison continued documenting evidence. Sarah, what are you thinking? She pointed to the Colorado route on the map. He's running a pattern. Look at these other markings. This isn't random. He's done this before, and he has a specific destination in mind. So we wait for the FBI to track him down. Miguel, by the time federal agencies coordinate across state lines and get authorization for rural searches, Danny could be gone forever. These trafficking rings move fast. They don't keep children in one place long. She was already calculating distances, travel times, resource requirements. The highlighted route would take approximately 8 hours of driving time. If Robert left around 7 the previous evening, he was already at his destination. But trafficking operations needed time to arrange transfers, which meant Danny might still be at the first location. What are you planning? Miguel asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. I'm going to find our son. Sarah, you can't just drive to Colorado and start searching. You don't even know where to look. She pointed to the map again, specifically to a circled area in a sparsely populated region near the Wyoming border. Rural areas like this are perfect for trafficking operations. Isolated, few law enforcement resources, easy to move people without attracting attention. If I was setting up a way station for moving abducted children, this is exactly where I'd do it. Detective Morrison rejoined them, having finished photographing the evidence. Sarah, I understand your frustration, but you need to let us handle this professionally. We have resources, contacts, legal authority. Detective, how many missing children cases have you worked? More than I want to count. How many had happy endings when the trail went cold in the first 48 hours? Morrison's silence was answer enough. They all knew the statistics. Children who disappeared into trafficking networks were rarely recovered once they moved beyond the initial abduction zone. Time was the most critical factor, and traditional law enforcement procedures consumed time. I'm not asking for your permission, Sarah continued. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You can help me do it intelligently, or I can go in blind. If you interfere with an active investigation, I'll have you arrested. Detective, I spent 6 years hunting people who didn't want to be found. I know how to track, how to gather intelligence, how to extract targets from hostile environments. Those skills don't disappear just because I clean weapons for a living now. Miguel placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder. What do you need from me? The question surprised her. Throughout their marriage and divorce, Miguel had been the cautious one, the voice of reason arguing against Sarah's more aggressive instincts. But, looking at his face now, she saw the same determination that had driven her through military service. I need you to stay here and coordinate with law enforcement. If they find anything, I need to know immediately. And if something happens to me, Danny's going to need his father. Nothing's going to happen to you. Miguel, this isn't a game. If I'm right about what we're dealing with, These people kill to protect their operations. I might not come back. Detective Morrison interrupted. Sarah, even if I wanted to help you, I couldn't give you law enforcement resources or authority. You'd be a civilian operating outside legal jurisdiction. I'm not asking for badges or authority. I just need information. Everything you can tell me about trafficking operations in that area, known associates, properties that might be used as safe houses. I can't officially provide that kind of intelligence to a civilian. Sarah understood the detective's position, but she also understood that official channels moved slowly while children disappeared. She began forming alternative plans, drawing on contacts from her military service who might have access to information outside law enforcement databases. Then, I'll find other sources. She turned to leave, but Morrison called after her. Sarah, if you're determined to do this, at least do it smart. Check in regularly. Don't go alone. And remember that your son needs you alive more than he needs you to be a hero. Outside the apartment building, Sarah and Miguel sat in her car while she made a phone call to a number she hadn't dialed in 3 years. The voice that answered was gravelly and familiar. Jake Hendricks. Jake, it's Sarah Martinez. I need help. Sarah? Damn, haven't heard from you since you got out. What's the situation? She explained quickly, efficiently, sticking to facts. Jake had been her team leader during their final deployment, a master sergeant with 30 years of experience and contacts throughout military intelligence networks. Jesus, Sarah, you sure this is the play? Going after traffickers isn't like hunting Taliban. It's exactly like hunting Taliban. Track the target, gather intelligence, execute the mission. Except you don't have a team, you don't have official support, and you don't have legal authority to do anything if you find them. Jake, it's my son. The line was quiet for several seconds. When Jake spoke again, his voice had changed. What do you need? Intelligence on trafficking networks operating in rural Colorado. Properties, vehicles, known associates. Anything that might help me narrow the search area. That's going to take some time. And, Sarah, if I help you with this, you need to understand the risks. These people don't play games. They kill law enforcement officers, federal agents, anyone who threatens their operations. I understand the risks. Do you? Because I don't think you do. This isn't like overseas operations where you had air support and extraction teams. If things go wrong, you're on your own. Sarah looked at Miguel, who was listening to every word. Jake, if someone took your child, what would you do? I'd probably do exactly what you're doing. Give me 4 hours to make some calls. I'll get back to you with whatever I can find. After ending the call, Sarah and Miguel drove to her apartment so she could gather equipment. Most of her military gear had been sold or stored years earlier, but she had kept certain items out of habit or sentiment. Her bedroom closet contained a footlocker that hadn't been opened in over 2 years. Inside were items from her final deployment, tactical clothing, communication equipment, night vision gear, and other specialized tools that might prove useful. You really think you can find him? Miguel asked, watching her methodically check each piece of equipment. I don't know, but I know I can't sit here while someone else looks for him. Miguel, those photographs in Robert's apartment weren't random. He was studying Danny specifically. This was planned, targeted, professional. What does that mean? It means Danny was selected for a reason. Maybe because he walks home alone, maybe because his parents are divorced and communication might be delayed. But it also means Robert is part of something larger, more organized. Sarah held up a GPS unit, checking its battery level. Organized operations have patterns, procedures, weaknesses. If I can identify the pattern, I can find the weakness. And if you can't? She looked at him directly. Then, I keep looking until I do. Miguel, I failed as a wife, and I failed as a mother too many times to count. But I'm good at finding people who don't want to be found. It's the only thing I've ever been truly good at. You weren't a failure as a wife or mother. Yes, I was. I chose military service over family repeatedly. I deployed when Danny needed me home. I prioritized missions over my marriage. But, right now, finding Danny is the mission, and I won't fail at this one. Her phone rang. Jake's number again. Sarah, I've got some information, but you're not going to like it. The area you're looking at has been flagged by multiple agencies as a trafficking corridor. Rural properties, minimal law enforcement, easy highway access. But it's also heavily monitored now. What kind of monitoring? Federal surveillance, undercover operations, the works. If your guy is heading there, he's walking into a hornet's nest of federal agents. That's good news, right? They'll catch him. Maybe. Or maybe he'll disappear into the network before they can move. Sarah, these operations have early warning systems, ways of detecting law enforcement activity. If Robert suspects he's being watched, he'll dump your son and run. The implications hit her immediately. Official law enforcement involvement might actually decrease Danny's chances of survival. Traffickers routinely killed victims who became liabilities, and an active federal investigation would make Danny an enormous liability. Jake, I need to get there first. I figured you'd say that. I've got addresses for 3 properties in that area that intelligence considers likely trafficking sites. But, Sarah, if federal agents are already in place, you could compromise their operations. If their operations fail, Danny dies. If I can extract him before they move him again, maybe he lives. It's your call. I'm sending you coordinates and whatever intelligence I could gather. But, Sarah, promise me something. You get one chance at this. If you can't find him quickly, you back off and let the feds handle it. I promise. The lie came easily. Sarah had no intention of backing off until Danny was safe. She copied the coordinates Jake sent, cross-referencing them with the marked route from Robert's apartment. 2 of the properties sat directly on his highlighted path. Miguel helped her load equipment into her car, though he clearly struggled with watching her prepare for what might be a one-way trip. Sarah, what if you're wrong? What if Robert went somewhere completely different? Then, I'll have wasted time. But, Miguel, look at this evidence. The photographs, the planned route, the timing of his departure. This isn't random. Robert knew exactly where he was going. How long will it take you to get there? Sarah consulted her GPS, 7 hours if I drive straight through. Add time for reconnaissance once I arrive. I should be in position by early tomorrow morning. What about the police here? Detective Morrison? Tell her I went to visit family for a few days. Give me at least 24 hours before anyone realizes where I really went. Miguel nodded, though his expression showed he understood the implications. If Sarah failed, if she disappeared into the same network that had taken Danny, he would lose both his ex-wife and his son. Miguel, there's something else. If I don't check in within 48 hours, call Jake Hendricks. She handed him a card with Jake's contact information. He'll know what to do. They stood beside her car in the apartment building parking lot as evening approached. Sarah felt the familiar pre-mission tension, the combination of fear and anticipation that preceded every dangerous operation. But this time was different. This time, failure meant losing the most important person in her world. Bring him home, Miguel said simply. Sarah lay motionless in the tall grass, studying the farmhouse through her binoculars as the sun climbed higher. She had been observing for 3 hours, cataloging every detail, every pattern of movement. The property was more active than she had expected for what was supposed to be a trafficking way station. Robert's vehicle sat in the gravel driveway alongside 2 other cars and a white van with tinted windows. Through the farmhouse windows, she could see figures moving occasionally, but the distance and angle made identification impossible. What concerned her most was the apparent organization of the operation. This wasn't a simple kidnapping, it was a well-established facility. Her phone vibrated with a text message from Jake. Federal surveillance team reported unusual activity at target location. Suggest extreme caution. Sarah typed back quickly. Already in position. Multiple vehicles on site. Need intel on building layout if available. The response came within minutes. No blueprints available. Local contacts report basement level, possibly reinforced. Sarah, feds are planning tactical entry within 24 hours. You need to extract before then. 24 hours might be too late. Sarah had seen enough trafficking operations during military service to understand the timeline. Children were rarely kept in one location for more than 36 hours before being moved deeper into the network. If federal agents waited for proper authorization and tactical planning, Danny would be gone. She shifted position to get a better view of the property's rear section. Behind the farmhouse stood a large barn and what appeared to be a storm cellar or root cellar entrance built into a hillside. The basement Jake mentioned might actually be separate from the main house, which would explain why the traffickers felt secure operating here. Movement caught her attention. The front door of the farmhouse opened and Robert emerged, easily recognizable from the description Mrs. Peterson had provided. He walked to his car, retrieved a large duffel bag, and carried it toward the storm cellar entrance. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. That cellar was where they were keeping the children. Her military training had covered hostage rescue scenarios extensively. The key factors were always the same. Identify the target location, determine the number of hostiles, plan multiple extraction routes, and execute with overwhelming speed to prevent harm to captives. But those operations had involved teams of trained soldiers with air support and backup plans. This time, she was alone. Robert disappeared into the cellar entrance and emerged 5 minutes later without the bag. As he walked back to the farmhouse, Sarah noted his relaxed demeanor. He wasn't acting like someone expecting trouble, which meant the operation felt secure. That could work in her favor if she moved carefully. At noon, a new vehicle arrived, a black SUV with Colorado plates. 2 men exited and approached the farmhouse. Even from a distance, Sarah could see they carried themselves like professionals. Not just criminals, but organized crime professionals with military or law enforcement backgrounds. This was getting more dangerous by the hour. She retreated deeper into the grass to make a phone call to Jake. Jake, I've got visual confirmation. Robert's here, plus at least 4 other subjects. They're using an underground facility, probably the storm cellar. Sarah, you need to back off. This is bigger than a simple trafficking case. We're getting intelligence that this location is a major hub for multiple criminal enterprises. What does that mean? It means they're armed, they're experienced, and they kill anyone who threatens their operation. Professional killers, Sarah, not just kidnappers. She absorbed this information while watching the black SUV. Jake, if this is a major hub, that means they're moving multiple children through here. Danny might not be the only victim. That's exactly why you need to wait for federal backup. Let the professionals handle it. The professionals are 24 hours out. These people could be gone by tonight. Sarah, listen to me carefully. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and operating without support. This isn't Afghanistan where you had a team watching your back. If you go in there alone, you're going to get yourself killed and probably get Danny killed too. Sarah knew Jake was right from a tactical standpoint, but she also knew that waiting meant accepting the possibility that Danny would disappear forever. The mathematics of the situation were brutal but simple. Certain death for her son if she did nothing, possible survival if she acted. Jake, I need to know about that underground facility. Any intelligence on layout, exits, security measures. Sarah, you're not listening to me. Jake, answer the question. She heard him sigh heavily through the phone. Local contacts report it's an old mine shaft that's been converted. Single entrance, reinforced door, possibly 2 levels underground. If they're keeping children there, it would be perfect for containment. Any other exits? None reported. Sarah, that means if you go in, there's only one way out. They could trap you inside. Or I could trap them outside while I extract the children. And then what? You're still outnumbered and surrounded with no backup plan. Sarah was already formulating an approach. What if I didn't go in directly? What if I created a diversion that forced them to evacuate the facility? What kind of diversion? The kind that makes them think federal agents are about to raid the property. The idea developed as she spoke. If she could simulate the early stages of a federal tactical assault, the traffickers would follow their emergency protocols, evacuate valuable assets, destroy evidence, and disperse to secondary locations. But if she timed it correctly, she could intercept Danny during the evacuation. Jake, I need information about federal tactical procedures for this kind of operation. How would they approach the property? What kind of preliminary actions would they take? Sarah, you're talking about impersonating federal agents. That's a federal crime. I'm talking about saving my son. Okay, hypothetically speaking, a federal approach would involve perimeter surveillance, communications intercepts, and coordinated entry from multiple points. They'd probably set up observation posts on the surrounding hills before moving. Sarah studied the terrain around the property. There were several elevated positions that would provide good overwatch for federal agents. If she could position herself at one of those locations and make it obvious she was conducting surveillance, the traffickers might assume the federal operation had already begun. What about communications? Would they jam cell towers, monitor radio frequencies? Standard procedure would be to monitor communications, but not jam them initially. They'd want to intercept intelligence about the operation. And how long between initial surveillance detection and tactical entry? Could be anywhere from 6 to 18 hours, depending on the size and complexity of the operation. Sarah checked her watch. If she could simulate federal surveillance beginning around mid-afternoon, the traffickers would likely plan to evacuate during darkness to avoid detection. That gave her a narrow window to position herself for intercept. Jake, one more thing. If I make this look like a federal operation, will the actual federal agents change their timeline? If they detect unscheduled activity at the target location, they might accelerate their plans. Sarah, you could end up caught between the traffickers and federal agents who don't know you're there. Then, I better move fast. She ended the call and began moving to a new position, an elevated ridge approximately 800 meters from the farmhouse that would provide excellent observation and make her presence obvious to anyone watching for surveillance. The key was to be visible enough to be detected, but professional enough to be credible as federal surveillance. At 2 o'clock, Sarah positioned herself on the ridge with her binoculars and GPS unit clearly visible. She made no effort to conceal her presence. In fact, she wanted to be spotted. Within 30 minutes, she saw movement at the farmhouse, suggesting her surveillance had been detected. Her phone rang. Miguel's number. Sarah, where are you? Detective Morrison came by asking about you. Tell her I'm following up on leads. Miguel, I think I found Danny. What? Where? I can't explain everything now, but I need you to do something for me. In exactly 2 hours, I need you to call the local sheriff's office in Millfield, Colorado, and report that you received a phone call from Danny saying he was being held at a farmhouse outside town. Sarah, what are you planning? Just trust me. Make the call at exactly 4 o'clock. Tell them it sounded like Danny was in an underground location, and that you heard other children in the background. Other children? Miguel, I think this place is holding more than just Danny. There might be multiple victims. The implications of rescuing multiple children complicated her planning significantly. She had prepared for extracting one child, but if there were others, she would need a different approach entirely. She ended the call and continued her surveillance. At 2:45, the black SUV left the property, heading back toward the main highway. 2 subjects remained at the farmhouse along with Robert. Better odds, but still challenging for a single operator. At 3:30, activity around the farmhouse increased dramatically. Sarah watched through binoculars as the remaining men began loading equipment into Robert's car and the white van. They were preparing to evacuate, which meant her surveillance simulation was working. But they were moving faster than she had anticipated. If they completed evacuation before Miguel's call triggered local law enforcement response, her window for interception would close. She moved down the ridge toward the property, using available cover to get within 200 meters of the storm cellar entrance. If the children were indeed underground, this would be their exit point during evacuation. She would have to time her approach perfectly to intercept them during the confusion. At 3:50, the storm cellar door opened. Robert emerged first, looking around nervously before motioning behind him. Sarah's heart stopped as Danny appeared in the doorway, followed by 2 other children she didn't recognize. All 3 looked scared but physically unharmed. The children were herded toward the white van while Robert and another man continued loading equipment. Sarah realized this was her only opportunity. Once the children were in the van, extracting them would become exponentially more difficult. She moved toward the vehicles using the farmhouse as concealment. Her plan was simple but dangerous. Disable the van, create confusion, and extract Danny during the chaos. She had approximately 10 minutes before Miguel's call would trigger law enforcement response. Sarah reached the edge of the property and could hear voices clearly now. Robert was arguing with someone on his cell phone, apparently receiving instructions from a higher authority about evacuation procedures. The other children were already secured in the van, while Danny stood beside the vehicle under guard. She recognized the guard from her surveillance. One of the 2 men who had been at the farmhouse when she arrived. He was armed, professional, and positioned where he could see all approaches to the van. Any direct assault would likely result in Danny being injured or killed. Sarah needed a better plan. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Jake again. Federal surveillance detected single operator on ridge near target. Moving up timeline for tactical entry. You need to extract immediately. The federal agents were coming. That changed everything. If she could hold position for another hour, trained federal tactical teams would handle the extraction. But if the traffickers completed evacuation in the next few minutes, Danny would disappear into a network that might never be penetrated again. She made her decision. Sarah approached the rear of the white, then using the vehicle itself for concealment. The guard was focused on watching for threats from the direction of the ridge where she had been conducting surveillance. She reached the van's rear door and peered through the tinted window. Inside, she could see the two other children, both appearing to be around Danny's age. They were scared but alert, not drugged or restrained beyond zip-tie restraints on their wrists. That was both good and bad news. Good because it meant they were mobile and aware. Bad because it meant they might panic and complicate extraction efforts. Sarah moved along the side of the van toward Danny's position. She could hear Robert still arguing on his phone about evacuation timing and transportation arrangements. The guard was approximately 10 feet away from Danny, close enough to prevent escape, but far enough to suggest he wasn't expecting immediate trouble. She reached the front of the van and could see Danny clearly for the first time. He looked tired and frightened but uninjured. When their eyes met through the windshield, his expression changed from fear to confusion to hope. Sarah pressed her finger to her lips, indicating he should remain quiet. But Danny's reaction caught the guard's attention. He turned toward the van, hand moving toward his weapon. Sarah realized her position was compromised, and her window for surprise was closing rapidly. She stood up behind the guard and spoke quietly. "Don't move. Don't turn around. Don't reach for your weapon." The guard froze, but Sarah could see his muscles tense as he calculated his options. She knew he would try something within the next few seconds, and she needed to control the situation before Robert noticed the problem. "Listen carefully," she continued. "I'm armed, I'm trained, and I'm here for my son. You can walk away from this alive if you make smart choices." "Lady, you don't understand what you're dealing with," the guard replied. "These people don't negotiate. They don't leave witnesses. Neither do I." Sarah heard footsteps approaching from behind her. Robert had finished his phone call and was walking toward the van. She had seconds to act before the situation became unmanageable. She moved around the guard, staying close enough to control him while positioning herself to face Robert. Danny watched everything with wide eyes, smart enough to remain still but ready to move if his mother gave him a signal. Robert saw the situation immediately. His hand moved toward his jacket, but Sarah was faster. "Robert, stop right there. Your friend is going to explain to you how this is going to work." The guard looked between Sarah and Robert, calculating odds. "She's alone," he told Robert. "Military training, probably special forces based on her movement. But she's outnumbered." "Where's the third man?" Sarah asked. "Inside packing the computers," Robert answered. "Lady, even if you get your son out of here, you'll never make it off the property alive. Maybe, but you definitely won't live to see it happen." Sarah could hear sirens in the distance. Miguel's call to local law enforcement was triggering response, but rural sheriff's departments could take 30 minutes or more to reach remote locations. She needed to resolve this situation quickly. "Here's what's going to happen," she announced. "Danny and the other two children are leaving with me. You're going to step aside and let that happen. In exchange, I don't kill all of you, and you get a head start before the sheriff's deputies arrive." Robert laughed. "You think you can threaten us? Lady, we're connected to organizations that make the military look like amateurs." "Robert, I've killed enemies who were connected to organizations that actually were military. You're small-time criminals who prey on children. There's no comparison." The sirens were getting closer, and Sarah could see panic beginning to affect both men. Their evacuation plan was falling apart. They were losing control of their captives, and law enforcement was approaching. Criminal operations hated uncertainty, and this situation was becoming entirely unpredictable. "Danny," Sarah called without taking her eyes off Robert and the guard. "Move to the back of the van and untie the other children." Quickly and quietly, Danny moved immediately, relief evident in his face at finally receiving clear instructions. Sarah could hear him working on the restraints while she maintained her standoff with the two men. "The third man is coming out," the guard warned. Through the farmhouse window, Sarah could see movement. The remaining trafficker was indeed preparing to exit, probably carrying evidence that needed to be destroyed or transported. Once he joined the confrontation, her tactical situation would become untenable. Change of plans, she told Robert. You and your friend are going to get in your car and drive away. Now, leave the van, leave the children, leave everything else. We can't do that. The organization doesn't tolerate failure. The organization doesn't tolerate dead operatives either. Sarah heard the farmhouse door open behind her. The third man was emerging, and she would soon be facing 3 armed criminals while protecting 3 children. Military training emphasized the importance of controlling multiple threats, but the mathematics were brutal. Even with superior training and positioning, one operator couldn't effectively manage 3 hostile subjects while protecting civilians. Mom, I got them loose, Danny called from behind the van. All 3 of you stay behind the van, and be ready to run when I tell you. The third man appeared in Sarah's peripheral vision, carrying a laptop case, and clearly assessing the situation. He was older than the others, graying hair, calm demeanor despite the circumstances. Leadership, Sarah realized. The local operation commander. Gentlemen, we have a problem, the older man said calmly. Local law enforcement is approximately 15 minutes out, federal agents are likely en route, and our evacuation has been compromised. He looked directly at Sarah. Ma'am, I respect your commitment to your child, but this situation is manageable. Take your son and leave. We'll consider it a family matter and not pursue retaliation. I'm taking all 3 children. That's not negotiable. The other 2 children represent significant financial investment. The organization can't absorb those losses. Sarah felt sick. These people discussed children as assets, investments, business transactions. The casual nature of their evil was more disturbing than overt brutality. Here's a counteroffer, she replied. You leave all the children and survive to explain the situation to your organization. Or you try to keep them and explain to your organization why their entire Colorado operation was compromised. The older man considered this. Sarah could see him calculating probabilities, assessing risks. Criminal leadership positions required the ability to make cold mathematical decisions under pressure. The organization values operational security above short-term profits, he finally said. We can rebuild financial losses, but we can't rebuild compromised networks. He turned to Robert and the guard. Load essential equipment only. We're leaving in 90 seconds. Sarah maintained her position as the 3 men rapidly loaded critical items into Robert's car. The sirens were much closer now, probably less than 5 minutes away. Whatever happened next would happen quickly. Danny, take the other children and start walking toward the road, she instructed. Stay in the tree line, move quietly, and if you hear gunshots, run as fast as you can toward the sirens. Mom, what about you? I'll be right behind you. Go now. The children disappeared into the woods while Sarah maintained overwatch on the traffickers. They were moving with professional efficiency, destroying documents and hard drives while loading portable equipment. Whatever operation they were running here was being systematically erased. Robert finished loading the car and looked at Sarah one final time. Lady, you don't know what you've interfered with today. The organization has a long memory. Tell your organization that Sarah Martinez sends her regards. And if any of you come near my family again, I'll hunt you down personally. The 3 men drove away just as sheriff's department vehicles appeared on the horizon, emergency lights flashing through the trees. Sarah waited until the criminal vehicle disappeared before following the children toward the road. She found Danny and the other 2 children crouched behind a fallen log, exactly where tactical training suggested they should seek cover. All 3 were scared but unharmed, watching her approach with expressions mixing relief and residual fear. It's over, she told them. You're safe now. Danny ran to her, and for the first time since receiving Miguel's phone call, Sarah allowed herself to believe that her son would be coming home. The other 2 children followed cautiously, still uncertain, but beginning to trust that rescue was real. Sheriff's department vehicles were approaching the property, and Sarah could see additional emergency lights in the distance, suggesting federal agents were also responding. The cavalry was arriving, but the battle was already won. She called Miguel while walking the children toward the road to meet law enforcement. Miguel, I have Danny. He's safe. Thank God. Where are you? About to hand him over to sheriff's deputies. Miguel, there were 2 other children here. I got them out too. Are they okay? They will be. As they reached the road, 3 sheriff's department vehicles converged on their location. Sarah identified herself to the senior deputy and explained the situation briefly. Her son had been kidnapped. She had tracked him to this location. The traffickers had fled when law enforcement approached. She carefully omitted her tactical intervention and the armed confrontation. Those details could be discussed later with federal agents who would understand the complexities of the situation. Danny stayed close to her as paramedics checked all 3 children for injuries, and law enforcement began documenting the scene. The other 2 children were taken into protective custody while authorities worked to identify them and locate their families. Mom, Danny said quietly, those people were planning to take us to different places. They said we'd never see our families again. Sarah felt the fury return, cold and focused. The traffickers had escaped today, but they had also lost a major operational facility and 3 potential victims. The organization Robert mentioned would be damaged by this failure, but it wouldn't be destroyed. Federal agents arrived an hour later, led by a tall woman in her 30s who introduced herself as Special Agent Rachel Chun. She interviewed Sarah extensively, focusing on how she had located the property and what she had observed during surveillance. Ms. Martinez, your actions today likely saved multiple lives, Agent Chun said. But you also compromised an ongoing federal investigation. Agent Chun, were you planning to raid this facility? We were developing intelligence for possible action. While you were developing intelligence, my son and 2 other children were being prepared for sale to traffickers. Sometimes developing intelligence takes too long. Agent Chun studied Sarah carefully. Your military record indicates extensive experience with reconnaissance and tactical operations. Were you conducting surveillance when the subjects evacuated? I was observing the property when they chose to leave. And you didn't intervene in any way? Sarah met her gaze steadily. I prevented 3 children from disappearing into a trafficking network. However, that happened. I'd do it again. Agent Chun nodded slowly. Ms. Martinez, we'll need detailed statements about everything you observed today. Your intelligence could help us identify and track the subjects who escaped. Of course. But, Agent Chun, those men mentioned an organization. Some 6 months later, Sarah Martinez stood in a conference room at the FBI's Denver field office, studying surveillance photographs of suspected trafficking networks operating across the western United States. Her official title was Special Consultant, but everyone understood her real role. She was the hunter who had emerged from cleaning weapons to become one of the most effective anti-trafficking operatives in federal service. Agent Rachel Chun entered the conference room carrying 2 cups of coffee and a thick file folder. Over the past 6 months, she and Sarah had developed a professional partnership that had already resulted in the rescue of 17 children and the arrest of 12 trafficking operatives. We've got a new case, Chun said, spreading photographs across the table. Missing 14-year-old from Phoenix. Disappeared walking home from school 3 days ago. Local police found evidence suggesting organized abduction. Sarah studied the photographs, noting the familiar patterns. Same methodology as the Colorado operation? Similar. Victim profiling, surveillance, precise timing. But there are differences. This operation appears more sophisticated. What kind of differences? Chun opened the file folder, revealing maps, financial records, and surveillance images. Multiple safe houses, encrypted communications, international connections. Sarah, we think this might be connected to the organization that threatened you after Colorado. Sarah felt the familiar cold focus that had defined her military service. The organization Robert had mentioned wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. Over the past 6 months, she had learned that trafficking networks operated like military units, with hierarchies, protocols, and strategic objectives. The Colorado operation had been a tactical defeat for them, but they were still operational. Have there been other incidents? Other children taken using similar methods? For in the past 2 months, across 3 states, all disappeared within the same 24-hour period, all using identical abduction protocols. Coordinated operation. They're scaling up. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Danny's soccer game at 3 p.m. if you can make it. He's been asking about you. She typed back, wouldn't miss it. How's he doing? Better every day. He talks about what happened sometimes, but he's proud of what you did. Sarah closed her phone and returned her attention to Chun. Agent Chun, what's the timeline on this new case? The girl, Maria Santos, has been missing 72 hours. Based on trafficking patterns, she's probably already been moved from the initial holding location. Where was she taken? Phoenix suburb, similar demographics to Danny's neighborhood. Working-class families, kids who walk home from school, limited law enforcement presence during afternoon hours. Sarah studied the map showing Maria's last known location. The abduction site was positioned near multiple highway access points, perfect for rapid transportation to secondary locations. But it was also close to several industrial areas that could serve as temporary holding facilities. Have you identified potential holding sites in the Phoenix area? We've narrowed it down to 6 possibilities, but we don't have probable cause for warrants. Sarah, that's where we need your expertise. Over the past 6 months, Sarah had developed techniques for gathering intelligence on suspected trafficking sites without triggering legal restrictions that hampered official investigations. Her methods were aggressive and sometimes legally questionable, but they produced results that saved children's lives. Chun, what's the federal timeline for official action? Minimum 48 hours to develop sufficient evidence for warrants. Realistically, probably 72 hours. Maria doesn't have 72 hours. Sarah was already planning her approach. Phoenix was 8 hours drive from Denver, but flights were available that could get her there within 4 hours. She could be conducting surveillance by evening and have actionable intelligence by morning. Sarah, there's something else you need to know. We've identified the man who was giving orders during the Colorado operation. Marcus Webb, former military intelligence, dishonorably discharged for illegal arms sales. He's been building trafficking networks across the Southwest for the past 5 years. Chun handed Sarah a photograph showing an older man with graying hair and cold eyes. Sarah recognized him immediately as the calm, professional leader who had negotiated the release of Danny and the other children. Marcus Webb is smart, experienced, and extremely dangerous, Chun continued. He's also been asking questions about you. What kind of questions? Your background, your current location, your family situation. Sarah, we think he's planning retaliation for the Colorado operation. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She had known this possibility existed, but she had hoped the organization would consider the Colorado incident a business loss rather than a personal affront. Chun, is my family at risk? We've implemented protective surveillance for Miguel and Danny. But, Sarah, if Webb is targeting you personally, that changes the dynamics of this case significantly. How so? If you go after Maria Santos, you might be walking into a trap. Webb could be using her as bait to draw you into a situation he can control. Sarah studied the photographs of Maria Santos, a smiling 14-year-old who looked remarkably similar to Danny. Same age, same build, same innocent expression that traffickers exploited when selecting victims. But Chun was right. The timing and methodology were almost too perfect. Chun, even if it's a trap, we can't leave Maria in trafficking hands. I agree. But we need to approach this differently. Sarah, what if we used Webb's trap against him? Explain. Chun moved to a whiteboard and began drawing operational diagrams. If Webb is using Maria to draw you into a confrontation, he's expecting you to operate alone like you did in Colorado. But what if we coordinated a joint operation? You conduct reconnaissance and intelligence gathering while federal agents position for tactical support. Sarah considered the proposal. Joint operations provided backup and resources, but they also introduced complexity and potential communication failures. In military service, she had learned that every additional element in an operation created new opportunities for catastrophic failure. Chun, joint operations require precise coordination and split-second timing. If federal agents move too early or too late, Maria could be killed. If you move alone and it's a trap, you could be killed and Maria could still disappear forever. Both women understood the mathematics of the situation. Solo operations provided maximum flexibility, but minimum safety. Joint operations provided maximum resources, but required perfect execution. Either approach could save Maria Santos or result in her death. Sarah's phone rang. Danny's number. Mom, are you coming to my game? Danny, I'm not sure. Work is complicated today. Is it another missing kid? Sarah hesitated. Over the past 6 months, she had tried to shield Danny from details about her new work, but 13-year-old boys were perceptive and persistent. Yes, it's another missing kid. Mom, you have to go help them. That's what you do now. The simple certainty in Danny's voice reminded Sarah why she had changed careers. Children like Maria Santos deserved the same desperate effort she had invested in saving Danny. The risks were irrelevant compared to the alternative. Danny, I love you. Tell your dad I might be traveling for a few days. Be careful, Mom. And bring them home like you brought me home. Sarah ended the call and looked at Chun. Agent Chun, here's how we're going to do this. I'll go to Phoenix immediately and begin surveillance. You coordinate federal resources for tactical support, but keep them positioned for rapid response, not active surveillance. Sarah, if Webb is planning an ambush, you'll be completely exposed. Chun, if Webb is using Maria as bait, that means she's still alive and still recoverable. The moment we involve official surveillance, that changes. Webb will either move her deeper into the network or eliminate her as a liability. And if he kills you, then federal agents move immediately, and at least Maria has a chance. Chun studied Sarah carefully. There's something you're not telling me. Sarah, what aren't you sharing? Sarah had been hoping to avoid this conversation, but Chun deserved to understand the complete situation. Agent Chun, over the past 6 months, I've been tracking the organization's communication patterns. They're not just operating in the United States. What do you mean? Sarah pulled out her laptop and accessed encrypted files she had been developing independently. The organization Webb represents is international. They're moving children across borders, connecting American trafficking networks with operations in Mexico and Central America. Sarah, international trafficking investigation requires State Department involvement, CIA coordination, extensive federal resources. This isn't something we can handle at the regional level, which is exactly why they feel secure operating across state and national boundaries. Chun, while federal agencies coordinate and develop appropriate authorization, hundreds of children disappear. Sarah's laptop displayed maps showing suspected trafficking routes connecting American cities with international destinations. The scope was staggering, a coordinated network spanning thousands of miles and involving hundreds of operatives. How did you develop this intelligence? By tracking financial transactions, communication patterns, and transportation logistics from operations we've disrupted. Chun, every time we rescue children from one location, I gather intelligence about the broader network. Sarah, you've been conducting unauthorized intelligence operations. I've been following leads that official investigations can't pursue due to jurisdictional limitations and legal restrictions. Chun stared at the maps for several minutes. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a mixture of admiration and concern. Sarah, what you've developed here is more comprehensive than anything federal agencies have produced. But it also suggests that stopping this organization requires resources beyond what regional operations can provide. Or it requires someone who can operate outside normal federal limitations. What are you suggesting? Sarah closed the laptop and gathered the surveillance photographs of Maria Santos. I'm suggesting that federal agencies continue developing official cases while I pursue immediate rescue operations. Chun, bureaucratic coordination takes time that children don't have. Sarah, that's essentially vigilante justice. Chun, that's saving children's lives. Agent Chin's radio crackled with dispatch traffic. An urgent message requested immediate contact with the case coordinator regarding new developments in the Maria Santos investigation. This is Agent Chun. Go ahead. Agent Chun, we've received intelligence that the subject may have been moved to a location outside Phoenix, requesting permission to expand search parameters. Chun looked at Sarah, who was already reaching for her jacket. Dispatch, what's the new location? Tucson area, specifically rural properties east of the city. Local law enforcement reported suspicious vehicle activity matching operational patterns. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Tucson was 120 miles south of Phoenix, close to the Mexican border. If Maria had been moved there, It suggested the organization was preparing to transport her out of the country. Chun, we're out of time. If they're moving Maria toward the border, this becomes exponentially more complicated. Sarah, wait. Let's coordinate with Tucson field agents before you do anything. Agent Chun, by the time federal agents coordinate across jurisdictions and develop operational authority, Maria will be in Mexico. We both know what happens to American children who disappear into international trafficking networks. Chun made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. Sarah, take my federal credentials and radio. If you locate Maria, you'll have authority to act and ability to call for backup. Chun, if I use federal credentials without proper authorization, your career is over. If we let Maria Santos disappear into Mexico because we followed proper procedures, my career isn't worth preserving. Sarah accepted the credentials and radio, understanding the magnitude of Chen's offer. Federal agents who violated protocol faced criminal charges, not just administrative discipline. Chen was risking everything to provide Sarah with tools she needed to save Maria. Chen, I need one more thing. Complete intelligence files on Marcus Webb and his known associates. If this is a trap, I want to understand exactly what I'm walking into. Already loaded on the encrypted drive, Chen handed Sarah a small device. Sarah, Webb's military background includes counterintelligence training. He knows how to identify and neutralize surveillance, how to set ambushes, how to eliminate threats. Chun, my military background includes the same training, plus actual combat experience against enemies who were better equipped and better trained than Webb. Sarah, promise me you'll call for backup if the situation becomes unmanageable. I promise. The flight to Phoenix took 3 hours, during which Sarah studied everything available about Marcus Webb and his organization. The files revealed a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had been operating for over a decade, moving hundreds of children through networks spanning 12 states. Webb himself was a former Army intelligence officer who had been court-martialed for selling classified information to arms dealers. His trafficking organization used military-style planning, communications, and operational security. But his greatest advantage was patience. Webb built networks slowly, carefully, avoiding the aggressive expansion that brought most criminal organizations to federal attention. The Phoenix Airport rental car counter provided Sarah with a nondescript sedan equipped with GPS and emergency communications equipment. She drove directly to the last known location where Maria had been seen, beginning the systematic surveillance that had become her specialty. The neighborhood where Maria Santos lived was typical of trafficking targets. Working-class families, limited security, children who maintained predictable routines. Sarah walked the route Maria would have taken home from school, noting sightlines, potential ambush locations, and escape routes. At Maria's school, Sarah interviewed teachers and administrators under the cover of being a federal consultant investigating trafficking patterns. The story was technically true, even if her authorization was questionable. Maria was a good student, her homeroom teacher explained. Quiet, responsible, always concerned about her family. Her parents worked double shifts to pay rent, so Maria takes care of her younger siblings after school. Did she mention anyone new in her life? Adults who might have approached her recently? Actually, yes. About 2 weeks ago, Maria mentioned that a man had offered her a part-time job helping with after-school tutoring. She was excited about earning money to help her family. Sarah felt the familiar cold recognition. The same methodology used in Danny's case. Identify vulnerable children, offer legitimate-sounding opportunities, build trust before striking. Webb's organization had refined their approach based on successful operations. Did Maria provide any details about this man or the tutoring job? She said he seemed very professional, well-dressed, kind to children. He told her the job involved helping younger kids with homework at a learning center. Sarah obtained the address of the supposed learning center and drove there immediately. The location was an empty storefront with for lease signs in the windows. No tutoring center, no legitimate business, just an abandoned building that provided a convincing cover story for approaching children. Her federal radio crackled with communication from the Tucson field office. All units, be advised that surveillance has identified possible trafficking vehicles southbound on Highway 10. Requesting immediate support from Phoenix assets. Highway 10 led directly from Phoenix to Tucson and continued to the Mexican border. If Maria was in that vehicle, Sarah had perhaps 2 hours before she disappeared forever. She called Chun on her encrypted phone. Chun, I need helicopter support for intercept operations between Phoenix and Tucson. Sarah, federal helicopter assets require authorization from Washington. I can't deploy them based on consultant recommendations. Then, Maria Santos dies in Mexico while we follow proper procedures. Sarah, where are you now? Northbound on Highway 10, pursuing possible trafficking vehicle identified by Tucson surveillance. Sarah, you can't pursue suspected traffickers in a rental car. You don't have backup, you don't have tactical support, you don't have arrest authority. Chun, I have federal credentials, a missing child, and targets who are 2 hours from international escape. Sometimes that has to be enough. Sarah accelerated through traffic while monitoring federal radio communications. The suspected vehicle was a white van with tinted windows, traveling with 2 escort vehicles. Professional convoy operations designed to prevent intercept attempts by law enforcement. But Sarah's military training had included extensive convoy interdiction techniques. The key was disrupting the lead vehicle to force the convoy into defensive postures that created opportunities for rescue operations. She reached the suspected convoy's location within 30 minutes. 3 vehicles traveling in tight formation, maintaining precise following distances, all exhibiting tactical driving patterns. This wasn't just trafficking, it was military-style transportation of high-value assets. Sarah called Chun again. Chun, I've got visual confirmation of the convoy. 3 vehicles, professional driving patterns, definitely organized crime. I need immediate tactical support. Sarah, the closest federal tactical team is 40 minutes away. The convoy will be across the Mexican border in 90 minutes. Sarah, do not attempt interdiction alone. That's a direct order. Chun, I'm a consultant, not a federal employee. You can't give me direct orders. Sarah ended the call and began planning her approach. Highway interdiction required careful timing and positioning to avoid civilian casualties while maximizing tactical advantage. The convoy was traveling through sparsely populated desert, which provided good conditions for aggressive action. She accelerated past the convoy to reach an overpass approximately 5 miles ahead of their position. If she could disable the lead vehicle at the overpass, the convoy would be forced to stop in an area where escape routes were limited. At the overpass, Sarah positioned her rental car to block the lead vehicle's path while providing herself with cover and concealment. The approaching convoy would be forced to choose between collision and defensive positioning, both of which would create opportunities for rescue attempts. Her federal radio crackled with new intelligence. All units, be advised that convoy vehicles are confirmed as stolen. Occupants should be considered armed and extremely dangerous. Sarah checked her weapon and prepared for the confrontation that would determine whether Maria Santos lived or died. Through binoculars, she could see the convoy approaching at high speed, apparently unaware of the interdiction being prepared. The lead vehicle reached the overpass and found Sarah's rental car blocking the highway. The driver immediately executed professional evasive maneuvers, but the overpass limited his options. The convoy was forced to stop, exactly as Sarah had planned. She announced herself through a megaphone. Federal agents, exit your vehicles with your hands visible. The response was immediate gunfire from multiple positions. Sarah took cover behind her vehicle while the convoy occupants positioned themselves for defensive operations. This was no longer rescue, it was combat. Sarah's military training included extensive experience with asymmetric warfare against numerically superior enemies. The key was superior positioning, tactical patience, and exploiting enemy mistakes. The traffickers had tactical training, but they also had operational priorities that created vulnerabilities. Her radio crackled with communications from federal tactical teams. Consultant Martinez, this is Tactical Team Alpha. We are 20 minutes from your position. Maintain defensive posture until support arrives. Tactical Team Alpha, negative on defensive posture. I have possible hostage situations requiring immediate action. Consultant Martinez, do not attempt hostage rescue without tactical support. Sarah ignored the radio and began moving toward the convoy vehicles. If Maria was indeed in one of those vehicles, every minute of delay increased the risk of the traffickers eliminating evidence. Hostage rescue operations required aggressive action, not patient waiting for optimal support. She reached the rear vehicle and could see figures inside struggling with restraints. Children. Multiple children, not just Maria Santos. Webb's organization was moving several victims simultaneously, which explained the military-style convoy security. Sarah's approach to the vehicle triggered immediate response from the defenders. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, forcing her to take cover behind the vehicle containing the children. The tactical situation was becoming desperate. She was pinned down with hostages in the immediate vicinity of hostile fire. But the traffickers had made a critical mistake. By positioning themselves to defend against external threats, they had given Sarah access to their primary asset, the children they were trying to transport. If she could extract the victims, the trafficking operation would lose its operational purpose. Sarah broke the rear window of the vehicle and began cutting restraints from 3 children, including Maria Santos. All appeared drugged but conscious, aware enough to understand they were being rescued. "Stay low and follow me," she instructed them. "We're going to move together to that drainage ditch. When I say run, you run as fast as you can." The children nodded, terror evident in their faces but cooperation assured by desperation for escape. Sarah led them away from the vehicles toward a concrete drainage channel that would provide cover during extraction. Gunfire continued from the convoy defenders, but their shooting was becoming less coordinated as they realized their primary assets were being extracted. Criminal operations that lost their operational objectives typically dissolved into individual survival instincts rather than coordinated resistance. Sarah's radio announced incoming support. "Consultant Martinez, Tactical Team Alpha is 2 minutes from your position. Federal helicopter support is requesting target designation. Tactical Team Alpha, hostages are secure in drainage channel east of highway. 3 adult subjects remain with convoy vehicles, confirmed armed and dangerous. Consultant Martinez, outstanding work. Maintain position with hostages until tactical teams establish perimeter control." Sarah looked at Maria Santos and the other 2 rescued children, all of whom were beginning to overcome the effects of whatever drugs they had been given. They were scared, traumatized, but alive and free. The trafficking operation that had threatened to destroy their lives had been disrupted. But as federal tactical teams surrounded the convoy vehicles, Sarah realized that Marcus Webb was not among the captured traffickers. The man who had built this organization, who had threatened her family, who had orchestrated the abduction of dozens of children, had escaped once again. Her encrypted phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Ms. Martinez, impressive work today. But this was just one operation among many. We'll be in touch soon. M.W." Marcus Webb was still out there, still operating his network, still destroying families. Today's victory had saved 3 children, but hundreds more remained in trafficking networks across the country. Agent Chin arrived with federal tactical teams and immediately began coordinating with local law enforcement. As Maria Santos was reunited with her family and the other children were taken into protective custody, Chin approached Sarah with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Sarah, what you did today saved 3 lives. But you also violated federal protocols, exceeded consultant authority, and conducted unauthorized tactical operations. Chun, would you rather have 3 saved children or proper federal protocols?" "I'd rather have both." "Sarah, we need to talk about your future with federal anti-trafficking efforts." 6 hours later, Sarah sat in a federal facility conference room facing Chun and Assistant Director William Hayes from FBI headquarters. Her official consultant status was being reviewed following the highway interdiction operation. "Ms. Martinez," Assistant Director Hayes began, "your actions today were successful but highly irregular. Federal consultants don't conduct tactical operations or engage in armed confrontations with criminal organizations. Sir, federal consultants also don't typically have military special operations training and personal experience with trafficking victims. Ms. Martinez, we're prepared to offer you a different arrangement. Full federal agent status, complete training, official authority for the operations you've been conducting as a consultant." Sarah considered the offer carefully. Federal agent status would provide resources, legal authority, and official support for anti-trafficking operations. But It would also impose bureaucratic limitations and procedural requirements that could delay rescue efforts. Sir, what would be the operational parameters for a federal anti-trafficking agent? Standard federal investigation protocols, interagency coordination requirements, constitutional limitations on search and surveillance activities. Assistant Director Hayes, standard federal protocols take weeks or months to develop actionable intelligence. Children in trafficking situations don't have weeks or months. Ms. Martinez, we understand the urgency, but we also have legal and constitutional obligations. Sarah thought about Danny, about Maria Santos, about the hundreds of children still trapped in Webb's network, and others like it. Federal agent status might help her save some of them, but it might also prevent her from saving others due to procedural delays. Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I think I'm more effective as a consultant. Chun and I have developed procedures that work within federal guidelines while maintaining operational flexibility. Ms. Martinez, consultant status doesn't provide protection if your operations go wrong. You could face criminal charges for today's actions. Sir, I could face criminal charges for not taking action if children die while we follow proper procedures. Assistant Director Hayes studied Sarah for several minutes. Ms. Martinez, there's something you should know. We've been monitoring Marcus Webb's communications since the Colorado operation. He's planning something significant, something that involves targeting you personally. What kind of targeting? Revenge operation. Webb views the disruption of his trafficking networks as a personal affront. He's been gathering intelligence about your family, your daily routines, your known associates. Sarah felt the familiar cold focus. Sir, is my family in immediate danger? We've implemented protective surveillance for your ex-husband and son. But, Ms. Martinez, Webb's organization has resources that could overcome standard protection protocols. What are you suggesting? We're suggesting that you accept federal agent status and allow us to relocate your family to secure locations until Webb is captured or eliminated. Sarah realized that her decision affected more than just her own safety. Danny and Miguel had already paid a price for her anti-trafficking work. Asking them to abandon their lives for federal protection was another burden she was placing on her thing bigger than just this operation. My family might still be at risk. We'll discuss protection options after we complete the investigation. Ms. Martinez, what you did today was dangerous and could have ended badly. But it also demonstrated skills that might be useful in fighting trafficking networks. Sarah looked at Danny, who was sleeping in a chair nearby, exhausted by his ordeal, but safe. She thought about the other children who might still be trapped in similar situations, and about Robert's threat regarding the organization's long memory. Agent Chun, what exactly are you suggesting? I will. Sarah drove through the night, stopping only for fuel and coffee. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, carrying her toward an uncertain confrontation with people who made a living by destroying families. But, for the first time in 8 years, she felt like she was moving toward something important rather than running away from her past. As dawn approached, she reached the first coordinate Jake had provided. The property sat 5 miles off the main highway, accessible only by a gravel road that wound through rolling hills and sparse trees. Perfect isolation for activities that required privacy. Sarah parked 2 miles away and approached on foot, using terrain and vegetation for concealment. Her military training returned instinctively, each step calculated to minimize noise and avoid detection. Through binoculars, she could see the property clearly: a large farmhouse, several outbuildings, and, most importantly, vehicles in the driveway, including one that matched the description of Robert's car. Danny was here. She was sure of it. Now she just had to figure out how to get him out alive.